Welcome to Sci-Fi Humanity. My name is Jack and I'll be your narrator for today. But before we jump into this incredible story, take a quick moment to check below. Are you subscribed? It's 100% free and helps our videos reach you more often, so you never miss an epic tale from the far reaches of the galaxy. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The Galactic Council never saw Earth as a threat. Sure, humans were unpredictable, stubborn, and had a tendency to meddle in things they shouldn't, but in terms of military power, they were nothing special. A Category 3 civilization. Advanced, yes, but nowhere near the level of the Thalzari Dominion or the Titanian war clans. Then came the Battle of Epsilon 3. It started like any routine engagement. A Thalzari strike force, 3 war cruisers, and a dozen escort craft dropped out of FTL near a human trade convoy. Their objective was simple: raid the ships, take the cargo, leave no survivors. Standard practice. The humans would surrender, as most species did when faced with superior firepower. Except, they didn't. Instead, the human ships changed formation instantly, as if they had been expecting the ambush. Their merchant escorts, small, outdated frigates, moved with unnatural coordination. The cargo haulers, meant for transporting food and raw materials, adjusted their vectors in perfect unison, their engines firing in controlled bursts. The Thalzari commander hesitated. Something felt off. Then the first shots were fired. The human escorts, ships that should have been nothing more than a mild inconvenience, ripped through the Thalzari fleet with terrifying precision. Their weapons weren't standard plasma arrays or mass drivers. They were kinetic slugs fired at relativistic speeds. Thalzari shields, designed to counter energy weapons, were shredded like paper. The first war cruiser lost his bridge in the opening salvo. The second tried to retreat, only for a civilian freighter to cut it off, executing a maneuver that should not have been possible for a ship that size. The third war cruiser, the flagship, managed to send a distress signal before being reduced to molten slag by what was later identified as a modified mining laser. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre, and these weren't warships. They were merchant vessels, civilian haulers and trade escorts, repurposed for self-defense. The distress signal reached the Galactic Council. At first, the analysts refused to believe it. How could human cargo ships dismantle a fleet of dedicated war cruisers? Then the report came in, a single phrase that sent chills through the council chambers. Those weren't even their warships. That was the moment everything changed. The Thalzari were no strangers to conquest. They had raised entire worlds, crushed rebellions, and turned countless species into obedient client states. Their war doctrine was built on centuries of domination. When they set their sights on Earth, they didn't expect a fight. But after Epsilon 3, something didn't add up. For weeks, the Council's strategic analysts pored over the battle data. Every simulation, every historical precedent suggested that humans should have lost. Their ships were outclassed, their weapons were outdated, their technology was inferior, and yet, the Thalzari hadn't just lost, they had been humiliated. The first red flag was the coordinated precision of the human fleet. Even elite naval forces couldn't execute maneuvers like that without neural-linked AI coordination. But humans weren't supposed to have that kind of tech. The second red flag was their weaponry. Kinetic slugs weren't unusual, but the way they were used defied logic. Humans had fired them with pinpoint accuracy, striking weak points in Thalzari. Armor that even their own engineers hadn't considered vulnerabilities. The third, and most unsettling, red flag: the ships themselves. When analysts examined the wreckage, they expected to find high-grade military alloys, reinforced bulkheads, state-of-the-art combat systems. Instead, they found cargo holds, fully stocked, with food or textiles, not war supplies, not weapons, just trade goods. These weren't military ships repurposed as haulers. They were actual merchant vessels with just a few improvised modifications, the kind of changes that should have been laughable against a real war fleet, and yet they had wiped out a Thalzari battle group in under 8 minutes. The realization sent a wave of unease through the Galactic Council. If humans could do this with cargo ships, what were their actual warships capable of? And why had no one ever seen one? The chamber of the Galactic Council was rarely silent. Today it was dead quiet. For the first time in centuries, no one was arguing. No one was bickering over trade disputes or border conflicts. Instead, every representative sat stiff and motionless, eyes fixed on the battle footage playing before them. The Thalzari fleet, gone, not crippled, not scattered, obliterated. And the worst part? Those weren't even human warships. A representative from the Vernathi Dominion broke the silence. Explain to me again. These were cargo vessels. The analyst presenting the report nodded hesitantly. Yes, Counselor. Civilian haulers with unconventional modifications. A murmur rippled through the chamber. A civilian fleet had wiped out one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy. That wasn't just a problem. It was a nightmare. The Xeric envoy, a species known for their cold pragmatism, leaned forward. Then where are the real warships? No one answered. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. For centuries, humans had been dismissed as a minor species, one that was technologically behind, strategically irrelevant, militarily weak. Clearly, that was a lie. The Ilithian chancellor, whose people prided themselves on espionage, tapped her clawed fingers against the table. We have no intelligence on a human war fleet, no confirmed sightings, no recorded engagements. If they have dedicated battleships, they are... She hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. Beyond our ability to track. The Thalzari delegate, still trembling from the loss of his people's fleet, finally snapped. They don't even need warships. They took out an armada with haulers. We cannot afford to provoke them. It was a stunning admission. The Thalzari had never feared anyone. They were fear incarnate, and yet here they were, pleading for caution. That was all it took. Panic set in. Some counselors wanted diplomacy. Talk, negotiate, offer Earth a seat on the council before they decided to take one by force. Others demanded containment, sanctions, embargoes, anything to limit humanity's influence. A few, foolish and desperate, whispered about a preemptive strike. That idea died fast. No one knew where Earth's warships were. No one knew what they looked like. And no one wanted to find out the hard way. The motion was passed immediately. Humanity was now classified as a Tier 1 strategic threat. It was the highest threat level possible, a designation previously reserved only for extinction-class events. And yet, even as the Council scrambled to decide their next move, a far more terrifying thought lingered in the back of every mind. What if humans weren't even trying yet? The Council had faced powerful empires before. They had fought ancient warlords, survived planetary invasions, and even held the line against an AI uprising. But this was different. This wasn't just about firepower. This was about the way humans thought. The analysts had spent weeks dissecting the battle. Every maneuver, every tactic, every unthinkable decision made by those so-called civilian haulers. What they found was deeply unsettling. Humans do not fight like anyone else. Most species followed predictable patterns in war. A fleet would organize, position itself properly, and engage in a controlled exchange of fire. A game of attrition where victory belonged to the side with better numbers or superior firepower. Humans? They ignored all of that. Their ships didn't just maneuver. They darted, weaved, and twisted in ways that should have torn them apart. They used their own hulks as kinetic weapons, slamming cargo freighters into warships as if 1,000,000 tons of steel was a valid replacement for a torpedo. One ship, just one, had overloaded its reactor on purpose, turning itself into a short-range EMP blast that crippled half the Thalzari fleet. No one in the council had ever seen anything like it. They treat warfare like a puzzle, one strategist muttered, watching the footage again. They don't just fight to win, they fight to break the game. And then there was the worst part. They weren't even panicking. Most species, when outnumbered or overwhelmed, showed signs of distress, hesitation, disarray, desperation. Not the humans. The fleet commander's communications were calm, methodical. The crew reports showed no irrational decision-making. To them, this wasn't a last stand. It was just Tuesday. The realization sent a chill through the council. Humans have been holding back. If this was what they did with cargo ships, what could they do with a real military? That question terrified the council. Because There was no answer, no data, no intelligence. Humanity had never waged a full-scale interstellar war. They had never deployed their best technology in a real conflict. And yet, even with modified civilian ships, they had annihilated a battle-hardened fleet. It was the unknowability that shook the Council the most. Every major empire had its strengths and weaknesses. The Duralish had an unbeatable navy. The Ilithians had spies embedded in every government. The Thalzari were feared for their brutal ground warfare. But humans? No one knew where their limit was. They had been underestimated for so long that no one had ever forced them to show their full power. The Council's final decision. By the end of the session, one thing was clear. Humanity could not be controlled. They could not be intimidated, coerced, or manipulated into submission. The usual methods wouldn't work. The only logical path was cooperation. A new resolution was drafted immediately. Full diplomatic recognition of Earth as a sovereign power. An immediate trade alliance offering humans the best deals possible. No further military engagements. Ever, the Council had faced many threats before. Some they had fought, others they had crushed. But humans? Humans they would befriend. War has always been about firepower, right? The side with the biggest guns, the strongest fleets, and the most advanced technology should win. That's what the Galactic Council believed. That's what every major empire believed. Humans knew better. The Council's fatal mistake. The Thalzari fleet had attacked first. That had been their biggest mistake. Not because humanity's weapons were superior. Not because they had some secret super weapon hidden away, but because humans didn't fight fair. They fought smart. By the time the first Thalzari warships engaged, the war was already lost. And they just didn't know it yet. War is logistics. We win before the fight begins. That phrase echoed in the council chambers as analysts pieced together what had happened. It wasn't about ships. It wasn't about weapons. It was about supply chains, infrastructure, and preparation. Humans hadn't been preparing for war in the traditional sense. They hadn't been stockpiling battleships or building massive space stations bristling with cannons. No, they had been building a supply network that stretched across the entire sector. By the time the first shot was fired, humanity had already secured fuel depots at key hyperspace lanes, established modular repair stations hidden inside mining outposts, stockpiled food and medical supplies on every colony world, built redundant communication relays that ensured zero signal disruptions. And most importantly, they had already mobilized thousands of civilian freighters, cargo haulers, and resource collectors. To any outsider, it looked like normal trade operations. To a human war strategist, it was the foundation of victory. A war machine that never stops moving. The Thalzari believed in shock and awe tactics. Strike hard, hit fast, overwhelm the enemy before they can react. That worked against most species, not against humans, cause the moment their first fleet engaged, they realized something horrifying. Humanity's war machine was already in motion. Every ship that was lost, replaced. Every damaged vessel, repaired mid-battle. Every lost crew member. New volunteers arrived within hours. The Thalzari fought with a fleet. Humans fought with an entire economy. They weren't just throwing ships into battle. They were replacing, repairing, and resupplying faster than the Thalzari could destroy them. The war wasn't being fought on the battlefield. It was being fought in supply chains, logistics hubs, and transport routes. And the Thalzari had already lost. The final blow. Logistics as a weapon. Halfway through the war, something changed. The Thalzari weren't just losing ships. They were running out of fuel. They weren't just suffering casualties. Their reinforcements stopped arriving. Somehow humanity had cut them off from their own supply lines. Not with warships, not with orbital bombardments, with freighters, with blockade-running cargo ships that slipped past defenses like ghosts, with fuel siphoning operations that drained enemy depots dry before their fleets even got there. And then came the final message: surrender. Now you have nothing left. No threats, no boasting, no cruelty, just cold, undeniable truth. The Council's new understanding. That was the moment the Galactic Council truly understood why humanity was terrifying. It wasn't just their ingenuity. It wasn't just their resilience. It was the simple, brutal fact that they never fought wars on the enemy's terms. They won before the battle even started. And that That changed everything. The war should have been over before it even started. At least that's what the Galactic Council had believed. The Thalzari were an established military power. Their war machine had conquered dozens of systems. Their fleets were massive, their armies ruthless, their technology decades ahead of most species, and yet they lost. Not just lost. They were systematically dismantled. And the worst part? Humans never even used their real warships. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. Not the usual silence of a formal meeting, but the kind of silence that comes when everything you thought you knew has just been shattered. The Council's highest-ranking strategists and analysts sat around an enormous holographic display. It showed the war's final battle, or rather what was supposed to be the final battle. A massive Thalzari armada had arrived in what they assumed was humanity's last stronghold. Their fleets had been battered, their supply lines were failing, their reinforcements had stopped coming. They were desperate, but they still had enough firepower to wipe out whatever human forces remained. And then the humans retreated, except that's not what happened. It looked like a retreat, but in reality, it was a trap. The human forces, civilian freighters, modular defense stations, retrofitted cargo haulers pulled back in a way that forced the Thalzari deeper into the system, and then the entire sector collapsed around them. Supply routes cut off, escape routes blocked, communication jammed. And just like that, the most feared fleet in the known galaxy ceased to exist. Not because of overwhelming firepower, not because of some hidden superweapon, but because they had run out of options. The Thalzari surrendered, and for the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council watched as an empire was crushed without a single official human warship entering the fight. Wait. Those weren't even their warships. A heavy silence hung in the chamber. Then Ambassador Zelva of the Telix Republic finally spoke. We have seen their strategy, their efficiency, their ability to wage war not with battleships, but with infrastructure. She gestured to the battle reports. But now you tell me. She turned to the human diplomat, Ambassador Reynolds, who had been sitting there calmly, watching them all process the inevitable conclusion. These were not your true war fleets? Reynolds gave a small, polite smile. No, Ambassador, they weren't. Silence. Someone coughed. A few council members exchanged uneasy glances. Zelva's mandibles twitched in disbelief. Then, where are they? Reynolds simply shrugged. In dry dock, mostly. Some are running training exercises. A few are patrolling, just in case. A Torgath admiral slammed a fist on the table. You're saying your real warships never even deployed? Reynolds' smile didn't change. Why would we need them? A cold, terrifying realization settled over the room. The Council had always feared human tactics, their unpredictability, their ability to turn any situation in their favor. But this was something else. This was power, not just in the form of military might, but in logistics, planning, strategy. Humans didn't fight wars. They ended them before they even started. The war was over. The Thalzari Empire was no more. But as the meeting adjourned, every council member knew this was only the beginning. If humanity had done this with retrofitted freighters and supply ships, what would happen if they ever truly went to war? Reynolds stood, gathering his data pads. Before leaving, he turned back to the council. His voice was calm. Let's hope we never find out. And with that, he walked out, leaving the most powerful leaders in the galaxy to sit in stunned silence. The meeting had barely ended before the council chamber erupted into chaos. Messages were flying across secured channels. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Every major power in the galaxy was in full-blown panic mode. Because now they all understood the truth. Humanity hadn't won the war. They had barely even participated. And if that was the case, what would happen if Earth actually decided to fight? Within hours, the Council's military strategists convened for an emergency session. Representatives from every major species attended. Their goal: to make sure no one ever provoked humanity again. The grand strategist of the council, a battle-hardened Zorvani admiral named Krell Voss, stood at the center of the chamber. His eyes were dark with exhaustion. This is not up for debate. pulled up a holographic report highlighting the battle that had ended the Thalzari. The humans never used their true warships. They won with outdated freighters, repurposed supply lines, and sheer logistical mastery. He turned to the assembled representatives. Let me make this clear. We do not engage Earth, ever. Not in skirmishes, not in trade disputes, not in anything. Silence. And then the ruling matriarch of the Sulva Dominion, a species known for their ruthless expansionism, let out a harsh clicking laugh. So we are to cower before them? Out of fear? Krelvas turned to her, his expression unreadable. It's not fear, matriarch. The hologram shifted. It displayed something new. A classified report, one that had only been recently decrypted. It showed human fleet movements, the ones that had fought the war. The other ones, the ones that had never been deployed, the real warships. They were enormous. Their sheer tonnage dwarfed most council vessels. Their energy signatures suggested weaponry that hadn't even been theorized yet, and they had remained in standby mode the entire time. The Sulva matriarch's smug expression vanished, finalizing the directive. A vote was called. It passed unanimously. New directive was enacted across the entire Galactic Council. Under no circumstances shall any member species engage in hostilities with the Terran Confederation. Any act of aggression will be considered a direct violation of Council stability. Any attempt to wage war against Earth will be met with immediate sanctions and military intervention. This directive was coded Red Priority. It was drilled into every high-ranking officer's training. It was whispered in the backrooms of political negotiations. It was the one thing every galactic leader now agreed on. You do not fight humanity, ever. And as the council adjourned, the unspoken truth weighed heavy in every leader's mind. If humanity could do this without even trying, what would happen if they really went to war? The council's emergency directive spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every military command center, every intelligence agency, every strategic division, all were briefed on the same unshakable truth. Humanity was untouchable. They hadn't just won a war. They had redefined what war even was. Message from Earth. A few cycles later, an official transmission arrived from the Terran Confederation. It wasn't a declaration of dominance. It wasn't a veiled threat. It was a simple formal acknowledgement of peace. The message read, "We appreciate the Galactic Council's commitment to diplomacy. Humanity looks forward to a future of cooperation and mutual prosperity. No arrogance. No boasting, just a polite, almost friendly message, and at the very end, a smiley face, a simple colon, and a closing parenthesis. The council's reaction. The council members stared at the message. For a long, uncomfortable moment, no one spoke. Finally, a low-ranking aide whispered the thought that was on everyone's mind. They're laughing at us, aren't they? No one answered, because no one knew. Was it kindness? A genuine sign of goodwill? Or was it something else? A quiet, unspoken reminder that humanity had just stared into the heart of the galaxy's greatest powers and smiled. The final verdict, it didn't matter. No one was ever going to risk finding out. Because if there was one thing the council understood now, it was this. Humans were unpredictable. They were terrifyingly competent. And worst of all, they were still smiling.